I mean, just.
No, I mean like,
Objective purpose,
what's the best way to define best?
profitability.
Your business profitability, if they're looking at operational Cascade,
Less headaches?
longer term people.
That's good.
Good.
We do have another minute, yeah, we're good. And Rishi said that he is coming, so I don't remember if I heard from him, but that's okay.
You said if we weren't coming, so I didn't respond.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
Same thing.
Oh, he says he's running a few minutes behind. Rishi,
Oh, did he?
he'll
Okay.
be there shortly.
Well, we have a quorum, right? Check my math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, cool. All right, since we know he's running a few minutes behind and I'm not sure about Renee, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order since it is 5:30. Want to be respectful of everybody's time. I will ask Ben, I suppose, to record the attendance.
Consider it recorded.
Okay. Thank you.
We're recording the meeting, right?
Excellent, excellent. Hopefully everybody's had the opportunity to look through the agenda. You'll notice it's pretty similar to the agenda from last month's meeting. There really wasn't much to add, so once you've taken a look, I would entertain a motion from one of you to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I will make a motion to approve tonight's.
Second motion.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to Article 3, which is approval of the minutes of the February 21, 2023 meeting. The only item of note that I have that needs to be changed is in the minutes, it notes that Dr. Siegel was absent. He was actually present at that meeting and did make a motion later on, so the minutes need to be corrected to reflect that.
No, I don't think so.
Was he
I
not
think it
here?
was the opposite of that. Dr. Siegel wasn't there, but in the minutes, it
It said-
showed that he made.
February, yes, I was at a conference.
All right, well, someone made a motion to send out our.
Yeah, I did read that and I thought, geez, that was nice of me.
Then I'll amend that, and Article 5 then needs to be adjusted to say that a motion was made by a member instead of member Siegel.
Yep, we'll figure out who it is. We'll go back and watch the video.
Oh, that's right. I forgot for a minute that there were videos. With that change, does anyone else have any changes or questions about the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes subject to that change to Article 5.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving along, Article 4, this is the point of the meeting where we acknowledge visitors and those wishing to speak to non-agenda items. The library is on the agenda, but if we have others who would like to speak to non-agenda items, this would be the time to come join us at the podium or raise your hand if anyone is with us on Zoom. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Do we have an opportunity later on in the meeting for the public to comment on agenda items?
We don't, but we can start adding that to our agenda.
It seems like if we should give the public the opportunity, or maybe just mend it to say it can include agenda items because.
I thought that we had done that in the past, but it may have not made it into this, this agenda.
Yeah, I don't remember the non-agenda, but it seems like we have we gotta have an opportunity
So
for the
this is
public.
this
to
is the
comment.
opportunity to speak to anything, agenda, non-agenda, anything that you'd like to say, to clarify Article 4. I think it's a distinction without a difference because nobody's jumping up to the podium, but we'll make sure in future agendas that it notes that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, then, moving on to Article 5, unless you're coming up to the podium. Yes, you are. My bad. I didn't mean to speed past you. Please come join us.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing the time. My name is Wendy Sturm. I live at 2570 Hunter Green Court in the township. And I just had a few questions. I read the attachments and I also attended the meeting last month. It wasn't really a meeting. But I just had a few concerns that I wanted to bring up, and it is regarding the library. I copied some statistics down, and it's just I'm a little confused because a couple of things here The number of visits in 2022 increased to 162,000 plus, which is great. But people served increased by 10,000, which is also great. But when I looked up the population of our township, it's 20,000. So that baffled me. So if half of our population wasn't using the library services prior to 2022, I would like some clarity on those numbers. And another issue that was kind of surprising to me, I hadn't been to meetings in a few months, was the amphitheater was mentioned and is being mentioned again. And I kind of thought that was put to rest, that we were looking at a gazebo. And in light of the budget informations and the overrun of phase one, and they're clipping the park benches, that was again kind of baffling to me that we're talking about an amphitheater and we can't afford the park benches according to the phase one plan. So I think it's just bringing up serious questions I have. And another point that was made was that patrons see libraries as an extension of their homes and workplaces. And that's where, you know, if that's so, which I really believe it is, I'm not contesting that, why isn't there more of a focus on providing space for those activities? Carols? I know the last meeting I attended at the library was in the community room, and there was a gentleman set up in there doing his work, probably remotely. And he needed all that space, but it just seems like there's a lack of providing for basic services of the library. And then that leads me to a third point, which is the interior of the library. I don't doubt the library services are fantastic. I've been a patron of the library for many years, but boy, oh boy, it needs to be updated. It is run down, shabby, and quite frankly, it's smelling. And it smells like a locker room to me when I walk in the door. And I think that's shameful for a community that's doing as well as our community is. So my question is focus. You know, are we focused on the right things? And are we doing the things that we have the money to do and should be undertaking? I haven't seen any crews in the library working on those interior upgrades that were presented in the past. I really would like to see that. That would tickle my heart. And just the questions about who's being served. I mean, if the population of the community is 20,000 and the visits are 169,000. That means every single resident in the community has come to the library 8 times in 1 year. And then again, the question mark of how do you increase the number of people you're serving by 10,000 when there's only 20,000 people that live here and we're not growing at that rate. So I think we need to do some critical thinking on that project. I'm all for it. I am not for an amphitheater. That's something I want to be clear on. There's not adequate parking. Are we in the entertainment business? You know, we have Meyer Gardens. We have all kinds of places to go for entertainment. An amphitheater, you can't use it all the time. You need covered areas for people to relax, have lunch with their friends, have a coffee, as stated in the library report. So again, I just question the focus of serving the community in meeting the needs of folks that want a community space. Do they want a concert space? I didn't hear that in any of the surveys last year. I heard that people need a community space, and I know people need meeting rooms, and they are not available in this building when you want them. So those are my points, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Good.
Oh, go ahead.
Can we ask questions?
Certainly.
You said lack of basic services. What do you define as basic services?
Well, I define the services that they comment on in their own report, which is workplaces, people coming with their computers or using the computers that are in the library. And those spaces are spare. There isn't enough room. And, you know, you have one not even really large meeting room, the history room, and you have students going in there to use that space because there's no space available. So that's what I mean by basic services. And if it's really a community meeting space, it should serve all of the community, including older people like myself, and as well as children. You know, I understand children have needs, but I also understand we have a lot of facilities and services and playgrounds and parks, recreation that we already provide. So I'm just asking these questions to hopefully get us to take a step back and really consider what we need to do as a community.
Well, thank you for that. And as you know, probably, the next item on our agenda is to talk about the outdoor gathering space project. I can't say that the members of the library, representatives of the library are prepared to answer all of your questions right now. They may be able to address some of them in the context of their presentation.
I did just notice too, in their report, they mentioned concerts more than once.
Okay, well, we'll
this.
hear more about their plans shortly, and if your questions don't get answered there, then I'm sure that they will be able to provide answers, and we can include something in our next month's agenda to address it in more detail.
Okay, I think we can, Manager Swayze, the interior of the library is outside the scope of the DDA, but can we give them an update? That's moving along too, I believe, but.
Yeah,
Can you
yep.
remind us
So
of the
we're
status of that?
issuing architectural, so the township board has budgeted money. Township actually board owns the library. So in the township library fund, we budgeted money for a refresh project in 2023 and 2024. So first step of that project is getting architectural services on board, and the township board's taking that first step right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Other public comments? Anyone jump on Zoom in the interim? All right. Let's move on then to Article 5, which is the point in our agenda where we will discuss and consider the Cascade branch of the KDL Outdoor Gardens and Activity Space. So if you wouldn't mind joining us at the podium, we're glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we
Would you
had
like us
a,
to turn on our, oh, I see the screens aren't down. Do you need
Yeah.
the screens?
it is a smaller group today, so we don't have to pull up the screens if you don't want us to. And I also want to recognize your comments. You're the ideal patron for us. You're engaged with the library, you're showing up and you care about it. And so thank you for sharing your comments today. I hope we can address some of them during our presentation, but if I don't, I'm available, talk to me. So we'll kind of just do a brief overview of what the outdoor project looks like. I don't think I've met all of you really closely, but if you don't know who I am, my name is Lula Brown. I am the regional manager #1 of the Cascade and Caledonia Library. I want to thank you for allowing us to present this project that has become really near and dear to my heart. I feel really privileged to be able to serve the residents of Cascade daily. The way that they show up for the library, the amount of care that they also give to our staff is really inspiring. And so with all of that, I have been at KDL since May of 2021. I see it daily, the hard work that our librarians are doing, whether it's helping patrons with tech tutoring, or it is facilitating large programs or even some of our smaller programs. What we have witnessed is that we're seeing an increase of growth to our library. And that does mean we're getting residents from some areas. So that includes Ada and surrounding areas that sometimes come to our larger programs. What we are experiencing is some space constraints with some of those large programs. And we're hoping that some of the outdoor space will be able to address that, but also to provide some natural gathering spaces for residents as they're coming in, whether it is to have lunch or it is a local yoga studio who wants to do something outdoors that we can't accommodate in the library. or if it's just a large program. We're hoping that today it's just 10 to 15 minutes of your time to talk and revisit the intention behind what we were going to do with the project, the philosophy, what our timeline looks like, and some of the updates that we got for phase one. As you might have read in the packet, library buildings have historically included outdoor spaces, and these spaces highlight the building's significance and contribution to the beauty of the property. I have made it my intention every week to start my week by walking around this outdoor space. And that includes seeing turkeys that are very large, that run back into the woods, but also just to see how beautiful the property is around the library. The way that the sun rises, I wish everyone could have that moment to sit outside of our building and just have coffee with a friend, which we offer at the desk. You can get free coffee, or even just to hold a meeting outside. We're really, really lucky to have the property that we are on. In the last couple of meetings, I've also heard our library cited as a world-class library in terms of service. I think this outdoor project is just an extension of the service that we can provide. One of the unique features of having a space like this at the library is that we can make it an interactive outdoor space. So that does include programs. It also includes services. We're currently looking to see, can we bring in a social worker in the library? Because that is becoming a constant need of residents. So we're working on that for fall. And what does that look like for our space if people are starting to come in constantly needing those resources? Outside of that, I do want to hand it over to Wes to just start talking a little bit about the phases of the projects, where we're at, and also what resources we're hoping to partner with you on.
Well, thank you very much. So my name is Wes Land and I own Native Edge. For those of you who I haven't met before, I had the chance to introduce myself. Just a little bit of background, just to recap about the project again. I was brought on board in 2022 to create a master plan for the outdoor space. And what started as what was initially kind of pitched as a pretty straightforward space project to engage people from the library and visitors with the outdoor grounds became something that was much of a grander vision of incorporating more of the community into the space and capitalizing on the opportunities that were there and bringing the programming from the library outside. So it has evolved pretty much every step of the way to where we are today, and having this be much more of a community hub versus just a way to get people from the library outside and having lunch or just enjoying the outdoor space. It's become that and quite a bit more. So we want to, in these spaces, really take the feeling of the library outside, where we have different scales of space, different places to gather. So small, intimate spaces for people to just be on their own or with a small group of friends, enjoy time immersed in nature, where we're going to have a lot of natural elements of the space, natural landscaping, and really connecting people with nature, and other spaces that are a little bit more active, where larger groups can meet and the library can have programming for different events. The space is completely accessible, so people with accessibility issues can fully engage with the space. And there's just a lot of different ways to experience it and meander and kind of discover the experience you want to get out of the landscape. And so we started with the Friends of the Library funding very generously, phase one. And we're going to talk a little bit about kind of where we are today. And Lulu, if you want me to talk about that right now, or that's fine.
Yeah, we can give an update on what has happened with phase one so far.
Great. Okay. So have they seen the updated budget that we just sent around?
No, because we needed a week in advance.
Sure. Okay. So we have updated numbers from the recent budget that we sent. What we've done so far is the initial budget that the Friends of the Library rather, are funding was based on that initial concept from 2022. And the feedback that we have got from stakeholders, from the township, is really this being envisioned as a community space. And that has led to the development of the space with a little bit larger sidewalks, being able to accommodate more people in terms of seating, in terms of the scale of the space, so that it feels right, whether it's just daily activities of patrons visiting the library, or there's 4th of July type of activities happening in the field, or other larger events where that space is still comfortable and can be enjoyed by larger groups of people. So that's been a little bit of the driving force of where this design has gone. and where the scale increase of this space has come from. That's the reasoning behind it. So we got you updated budget numbers for the meeting last month. I have new numbers now and that is based on some meetings I've had with contractors who I don't have firm quotes on things, but I have sat down with contractors and gotten pretty accurate pricing on some of the different elements of the design. So we have updated numbers on that. So that's where some of this has come from. And we're really excited about the project. I think Lulu, maybe I'll kind of kick it back to you to talk about the process from here.
Yeah, so as we've been going in between the township coming to the DDA, construction prices continue to increase. So what we planned for when we first reached out to Native Edge, our biggest concern is how do we make sure that we're really good stewards of the resources that we currently have? And what are ways that we can not only save money, but deliver on a really great outdoor space. So we wanted to come back in front of the DDA to hopefully see if there's a way to partner with phases 2 through 4, but also there are some challenges that we're experiencing with phase 1 related to the size of the sidewalks and the cost of concrete.
Yeah.
And so Wes, do you want to cover any of those updates with what phase 2 through 4 looks like? It should have been included in the packet of what the master plan looks like as well.
Yes. So phase 1 is, and from the breakdown that we provided already, phase 1 is everything just north of the northwest of the library to that little wood lot there, and everything that is in front of it, which you have the design for phase 1. Phase 2 is everything to the north, which would be not an amphitheater. So that's some of the feedback that we got. That's more of a pavilion band shell. And just to kind of touch on that question as well, it's not going to be something that is going to compete with Meyer Gardens in terms of scale of event. Originally, and this comes back to where we came from and where we have now arrived at, we were thinking of a pretty modest covered pavilion, much more in a park-like setting, where we've continued to get feedback of this being maybe a step above that, something similar to a band shell that is a pavilion, functions for the everyday use, but also can be covered for when you do want to plug in an amplifier and a microphone and be able to communicate to a little bit larger group out there. So nothing in terms of, a large concert venue, something much more fitting the scale of the site. So in terms of where costs have gone, one thing we want to make very clear is that, especially to the DDA, to the township, to the Friends of the Library, is that we're not saying, well, we can't do phase 1 because construction costs are more. We have developed this design that we knew was going to be a little bit beyond that. And if there is no additional funding for phase 1 from the DDA, we will be able to do phase 1. It will be much more in line with the original concept that was developed. And that is perfectly well. Some things will get scaled back in terms of likely size of width of sidewalks, number of benches. Probably the overall scale of it a little bit will shrink slightly to accommodate the budget, but that's okay. We can do all that with the budget that we have available. So that's one point we wanted to make clear. However, we didn't want to say, well, that was the budget that we had put forward, so we have to fit that. We really like the design that has been put together, thinks it fits with the feedback that we've received, and said, well, why don't we present this to see if there's interest in funding that expansion or that larger kind of vision for the space as a community hub. And if there is, then great, then we can go forward because we have pretty solid numbers now to support that and where we're going in a high degree of confidence. In addition, for phase 2, we've gotten feedback on potential pavilion costs and things like that. So we have that more dialed in as well. So that's, I think, what we're looking at. And if you want me to dive into the actual numbers here for phase 1, and I don't have a before, this is my updated numbers here. So for phase 1, we have a total estimate, and just estimates, mind you, of $461,564. We have a donor contribution for a fountain of $30,000. The Friends of the Library contribution for $201,000. So that is a estimated remaining phase 1 needed of $230,564. If that was something that the DDA would be looking to invest into phase 1. For phases 2 through 4, now these numbers have been adjusted as well to reflect different material costs and things like that. One thing I do want to say about these costs are, these are assuming we would get the green light and funding so that the phases 2 through 4 can be completed the same time as phase 1, because we're going to experience cost savings in terms of reduced mobilizations, things that have some redundancies, like when we think about excavation and grading and things like that. Other things such as site prep and demolition and things of that nature, where we're going to save on by doing it all in one fell swoop. So the phase 2 total, including the pavilion, contingencies, and things of that nature, is $714,000. Phase 3, which includes the continuation of the sidewalk around the northeast side of the building to connect to the parking lots, gardens and seating areas on that side, that's $103,000. And then phase 4, which is taking a lot of the detention basin down here and other large grassed areas, which we want to transition from grass to natural prairie or other types of landscapes. That is $34,798, the estimate, which gives us a grand total for phases 2 through 4 of $847,091. So I think that was what we were coming at for the ask for 2 through 4, and then the additional phase 1, if that was something that the DDA was interested in, helping us to realize that vision for the space.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's jump into questions because I'm sure that there are a bunch. Yes.
Does this include any additional parking space? Because if we're drawing more people here, are we going to need more parking?
It has been a challenge for things like our reindeer night, where there's 1,500 people that show up, or we had a program early April during spring break, which was a dino dig, and there were 600 people that showed up. What we're typically seeing, and Nodos has been a fantastic partner. They have allowed people to park in that space, similar to when we have elections in this building as well. There are not any current plans for additional parking within the scope of this project. We find that our parking lot is only really full either during a large program or in the mornings when we're doing story times. And that's usually for about an hour, hour and a half.
So if you set aside the Nodos overflow parking, what other options are there for overflow parking, like down the street, down Jack Smith?
Yes, people usually will park along the street as well.
Okay.
How long do you think it would take construction wise?
So that's a big question, especially for the pavilion. So and phase 2 has not been designed yet. Phase 2, the design is going to be taken care of when that portion gets approval. However, we've looked at some pavilions and gotten costs based on those. The pavilion is the big question mark, because some of our contractors did mention that they might be able to do it cheaper and better, doing it completely custom. So that's the question mark to me, but putting the pavilion aside, I think that we could start construction this fall and get a lot of the hardscape and hard features in, likely with planting the following spring. So our target has kind of been completion spring of 2024. But when it goes out to bid, and I know that there are some contractors who are aware of this project who will be ready to bid on it pretty efficiently, but we want to make sure we get multiple bids for the project so that we can take a look at different options. So it will be dependent upon contractor availability and timeline as well. So hopefully, starting this fall and getting a lot of work done this fall should we be able to move forward.
Yes.
In the revised bids, how much is the pavilion?
So we have the pavilion. The pavilion didn't change much. Really, what changed a tad in regard to the pavilion was the concrete beneath it. On a square foot basis, but we have $300,000 for the pavilion. And I will note that that's a 60-foot pavilion. And even when I was reviewing that with the manufacturer, he said that's a pretty big pavilion. So in all likelihood, that will probably be scaled back a little bit. But given that we're in the planning process, I was a little bit hesitant with a feature like that to want to pull it back too much, only to then have to go and say, well, it might be a little bit bumping up against that boundary. So
can I get get some more information from you about the change in the width to the sidewalks. Was that based on some sort of study or recommendation, or why the change from original?
The change was to accommodate a little bit heavier pedestrian traffic. Because thinking about when you have larger events out there, having the space feel comfortable and not claustrophobic when there are large groups. But the curvature and the different spaces that are available off the site will still allow for the space to feel intimate, also while accommodating larger sizes. So this, and I think originally I had 6 foot, and I noticed out by the road it's 7, and I said, well, let's match that on the interior. So that was one of the big reasons for putting that to 7 feet. Also, just when originally thinking that it was mostly going to be people from the outdoors. And as I got to know the project better, got to know the uses better, and discussed this with the project team, and knew about the different events that were happening, it made sense that, okay, when this place is really full, we want people to feel comfortable not in here, not like they're kind of sliding by each other. So
There's also feedback from the building and grounds manager, so they have snowplow equipment. So the sidewalks have to be 7 feet wide in order to keep it.
Makes good sense.
Wasn't there a time early on where there was a restroom facility that was in the plan? Because I'm not seeing anything from for the public to be able to use a restroom for these events.
That was one of the, so that's one of the suggestions that we've received. The cost was an additional $100,000. And then we started thinking through, what does maintenance look like? Who's going to maintain those facilities? And at the current time, our building and grounds crew is stretched, and we currently have restrooms that are available within the library. One of my hopes with the interior refresh is to see those updated a little bit. She spoke a little bit about smell. That's definitely a challenge for us sometimes in the lobby where we put some things in there, but I think the current facilities and the way that it's set up, we can open those restrooms if needed, so people can access the restrooms inside the library without accessing the rest of the library as needed.
So during potential evening events,
Yes.
the doors to the physical library could be locked, but the annex or the vestibule area would be potentially open for the public to use. Restrooms.
Yes, because we do it for Memorial Day as well. We have a way to lock the doors and they're still accessible. So if the library is not open, we can make sure that restrooms are available if someone's hosting a large event.
Parks Committee's looking at bathrooms at a couple different locations too, or pricing them out, and they were a lot, like 100,000 was on the cheap end.
yeah, I was going to say
Better
that
to
was,
bring in porta potties if you have a big event.
yeah.
Well,
Save
just
attention.
taking that 300,000 for a pavilion.
Yes.
Thinking that a pavilion, I'm thinking, shelter.
Right.
Or a bathroom, you've got plumbing, electrical, all the other things.
Right.
That would cost that 100,000. So seeing a $300,000 pavilion, yeah, that's just trying to wrap that around my head here. Of this is made of marble or what?
Right, like we could argue, like there's room for taking a closer look at that, right? The
Oh, yeah.
pavilion, the 300,000, because maybe I'd put in a bid for that construction at 300,000, but you know what I mean? Like there's.
Yeah.
Only if you get to chip the marble.
Definitely, and the style, and it's really endless. And so when we get into that design portion, that's something that we'll be looking at is different style options. And like I mentioned, I did get good feedback from our contractors saying we could do something really nice for, cheaper than that. But like I mentioned, I mean, if we don't want to propose something and then have it go the other way. So, I mean, but there is, I think, opportunity potentially for cost savings. It's not like if we say, oh, this is the budget, we don't have to spend that money, or it can go into cover other things as needed. So
it's also the township's property. So with that said, like we're trying to get the closest that we can to some of these quotes, but ultimately we have to go back to the township board where they're approving everything related to construction. So we're trying to get as close as we can with the quotes, but we know that it's not perfect. We're trying to get as close to perfect as possible.
It's better to aim high, like it's better to have good surprises than bad surprises.
yeah, exactly.
Couple of questions is, could we build this, put the cement in and everything without building the pavilion? Initially, and then adding the pavilion at a later date? Is that a reasonable alternative here?
Is your question one is to staging or?
or staging, do stage 1 through 4, but without the pavilion. Cutting 300,000 from the budget initially, and then at a later date, do it. That's one question. And the other question I have is in the refresh of the library, are we making any additions for spaces and upgrades and things like this? Because if the community members feel we need more spaces and we're not addressing that, but we're spending all this money out there, is there going to be public, negative feedback? I'm
Good question.
just asking a question.
Good question.
So, and I guess I turned to Grace and to Ben for some information about, I realize that the architectural plans haven't yet begun, but is it the thought that the footprint of the building might change in addition to the changes on the inside?
So the very initial conceptual plan does not have any footprint changes of the library. So none of the walls are being moved out or anything like that. Now, with that being said, it does involve some pretty significant rearranging of the inside of the library. And I think that there might be an opportunity to do that. One of the key things, right, is so we went through again, conceptual preliminary engineering and architecture, right? So when the new architect is brought on, whether it's the firm that helped us with the preliminary stuff or a new firm, the first step in that process will be to revisit that preliminary plan. So if we continue to get feedback that no space, working space, collaboration space is becoming more important, there's still opportunities for us to design that into the project before there's any type of bid that goes out.
It did consider that though, right? How usership has changed and it's not so much about coming to check out a book, but it's kind of how the
people are interacting with the space
Yeah.
Is becoming more and more important. I've recently been able to go to a furniture company in Walker with the facilities manager for KDL just to start looking at some ideas of what does library furniture look like now. And there are some really great options, which I'll make sure that I am continuing to share that with Ben. And as we move forward with that process of how do we create some additional meeting spaces, because it is becoming more important in our library that people need access. One of the things that's also addressed with the interior refresh, which is still kind of outside of the scope of this, is to look at where our current Friends book sale is and to see if that can shift, making that desk space a little bit smaller, and seeing if we can recapture that space where the Friends bookstore currently is to build another meeting space of some sort.
So I want to circle back to the engagement in the community. And I think you said you take care of 2 different libraries, this one and Caledonia. But overall in Kent County, how do those numbers as far as engagement, the per capita engagement, if you can divide the number of population or by the amount of people that are coming in, like, are we on the higher side in Cascade, on the average side? Like, how do we look as a community?
I can't answer that specific question, but I can get the direct answer to you. When I look at the data dashboard that we have on our side, the Cascade Library has some of the highest market penetration out of all of the libraries in terms of how many people live in our area and how many people are active holders. Yes, and by active, it means that they've actually used their card. It doesn't count the people that are just walking in the building, and it doesn't count the people that come and just use a meeting space or that take the little slip to use computers quickly. That's 10,000 people who have actually swiped their card to check out a book or some type of item in the last 12 months. So there are a lot of people that probably aren't captured.
So looking at the data, I mean, to me, as a board member, that's really encouraging that our community uses the resource that's for them in a very engaging fashion. And then it makes sense to maybe take deeper consideration into the speaker's thoughts about are their basic needs being met, and is there room to grow that engagement and really evolve the inside of it and modernize it in a way that helps not only our kids, but also older populations stay more engaged with the community and be more part of the fabric of the community, I guess, for lack of a better word. I think these numbers are really encouraging. I mean, I'm stunned at looking at them. Thank you.
Is the project for rehabbing the inside, is the timetable consistent with the outside project? I mean, are we moving on parallel tracks, or is the outdoor project projected to be something that is started before the interior project?
The outdoor project would be started before.
So, and the reason I asked that question is I'm wondering whether we need to be more cognizant and sync up both projects so that if, we don't get down the path of making a lot of changes to the outdoor space only to then
Inhibit us
determine
inside.
inside needs to expand or any of that. And I don't want to, screw up the timetable for you guys either, but I would hate to do beautiful things in the garden only to then
Undo it,
walls of the building.
Yeah,
Do you see that as a problem? Because what I've heard from you guys is that you've got a good grasp on both and you're both were led and initiated by you in design, and then it's more of a funding issue. And
Yeah, for the outdoor space, it's more of a funding issue. We have the resources to execute the interior refresh. I feel really confident about the library furniture that's available now. What Ben, Eric, and the other township staff are able to also provide. We also don't want to do the interior refresh during busy times for the library either. So we want to be mindful that at some point we might have to close the doors for a couple of weeks when they're ripping up carpet or changing all the lighting. And we hope to do that at a time that's typically lower traffic for the library so that residents aren't experiencing a loss of not being able to use a resource that they're clearly coming in to use.
And just really quickly on that point too, as far as the outdoor project goes and synergy with the building, I mean, I've been led to believe, and I think Ben confirmed that there's not really any footprint changes. The main door is going to remain in the same location. So if something like that were to change, but we haven't been led to believe that that's very likely to happen. So as long as that main access point from the library out to the outdoor space is not changed, it really won't have an impact on the outdoor project at all.
That's encouraging. See,
So I think in past presentations from the library, you have spoken in regards to more and more people, of course, are utilizing the library and or reading books via technology.
Mhm.
So as, again, we hear about the opportunity and the need for personal space, rooms, whatever the case may be. Do we foresee that in the interior plan too, to maybe say, hey, you know what? We're gonna be able to eliminate potentially 15% of our books to be able to use that space as meeting the needs of the general public, maybe a meeting room or cubicles for students to study or whatever the case may be.
Yes, we currently, from the time that I started to where we are now, I think the actual footprint of our collection is downsized about 15%. What we're seeing from residents, and I might be misquoting with this, I think Cascade users have increased by at least 10% with the digital usage. It's one of the ways that we continue to navigate as we're seeing various patrons coming in with different needs. It's required us to even expand our tech tutoring, especially for our senior population, because they're finding sometimes they'll come in and say that the books are too heavy, or I'm going down to Florida for the winter. So how can I get all of my books? And we have a few librarians who are currently working on expanding the hours that we're offering that service to. I am hopeful that we can find more ways to integrate technology and that we evaluate our collection on a monthly basis. We're pulling more stats to see what are people responding to, because we want the size of our collection to reflect what the community wants.
In general, just across all libraries, I would think, and I think I've seen some data on it, that trend is continuing to grow across the country, if you will. So it's only going to get better in terms of space utilization here and you being able to take over physical space that you don't need for book stacks.
Yes. And it might look different. 2 years ago, we were in a pandemic and I saw the numbers and we were down double digits. But now that we're seeing traffic kind of return, the last month, I think our total circulation compared to like previous years, it was down 1%. So we're constantly reviewing the data. And I'm hopeful that we can figure out a way to make sure that we're meeting what the community wants, because that's my stance as a library manager, is I want to make sure that our library is serving what the residents are asking for.
Steve and Rick.
I'm gonna go to the outside here again, and we're bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
but, As we see this facility, and we have a good 4 months of winter. Do we foresee this area being utilized 12 months of the year in some facet? Or is it gonna be a 7-month, 8-month period where the general public will be able to use the facility?
I see it year round. There are some of the spaces where there's that 7-foot wide concrete area that we have to partner with building and grounds to make sure that it's plowed. But what Wes has done is some really creative, ingenious designs to allow people to interact with nature, similar to what we're seeing in some of the other trails and areas that he's also designed before. It is my intention that we're also seeing some of those larger programs, like the reindeer night. Truly, there was 1,500 people that showed up within an hour. We didn't have the space to hold them within the library. And that was a light bulb moment of this is really needed for that space, because if we can bring the reindeer underneath that pavilion and allow people to kind of interact in a larger area, that's really helpful. We've also gotten feedback around there used to be Sunday night live concerts that happened here. I see that maybe transitioning into that outdoor space, maybe during the summers, probably not during the winters. I personally wouldn't want to be out there when it's freezing cold. But I see that space being activated year round, or our seasonal programs like the Dino Dig that we just had a couple weeks ago.
And just really quick too, I mean, we're gonna have electrical and things like that out there. Think about, lighting the space up for the holidays and people come and meander the space, build snowmen, if there's space where people can safely gather and it's kind of recognized as a space for them to utilize, they'll be able to do that for the various programming the library has and just on their own. So.
Oh, hi. I'm Jennifer DeVault. I'm the Director of Library Operations and am in charge of all the branches of Kent County. So I just wanted to also say thank you for taking time, and I wanted to introduce myself, but also answer a couple of the questions that you had that talked about like Kent District Library as an entire organization and not just Cascade. Lulu is too humble to say that you have two of our best managers here at your branch. You're very lucky. They're very dynamic, and they also are encouraging so many new people to come into the library. So we're super lucky with the staff that we have here at Cascade. It's a very welcoming place, and you're growing like crazy. One of the things that we can definitely see, so this branch and Plainfield branch are the largest by the collection and numbers that are going out of the library. You're out of 20 branches, this branch in Plainfield are the largest as far as what we see going out the door. And as far as the collection and the ebooks, we've just hit the tipping point where we're about 50-50 now. So it was before the pandemic, there would be a lot more physical books than the ebooks. Kent District Library has the most ebooks in the state of Michigan. So we had over 1 million checkouts last year, system wide. So I just wanted to be able to answer a couple of those different questions. And then things like the Dino program that we had during spring break. Those aren't all happening at all of the different libraries. Some of the most dynamic programs are happening here at Cascade. And I think it's important for you to know that. Lulu is never going to say that because she wasn't facilitating that. But it is true. There's a lot of really cool things that are happening. We don't have 1,500 people coming to programs at some of our other branches. But both here and in Caledonia, we have just so many people coming. And the need for the outside space and the need for the refresh is great here in Cascade.
Caledonia has an outdoor space, right? My sister-in-law and brother-in-law moved there, and they always, so it'd be new with little kids, they go to the Caledonia branch all the time.
Yes, they have a children's garden, and they're also developing a splash pad right outside. So.
Question for you, what is the projection of growth over the next 5-7 years here? Where I'm coming with that, if there's projection, we're going to need more space. I'd hate to, again, spend money on the gardens and then, a few years down the road, have to tear some of it up.
Yeah, well, and I know that really sort of been specialty as far as the township and the building. So I don't want to step on any toes as far as that goes. I do know that the space is well used. People are in and out of this building. I know that one of your questions was, how could we possibly have that many people come in? But people are accessing this branch from all over, just like our residents can access Ada or even go to some of our smaller branches. We just have this new project, which I'm sure you have seen, called the Wonder Nook. So every branch out of all 20 branches have gotten this new children's play place. And we are encouraging people to go to all 20 branches to visit, and each branch is different and it reflects the community. So you guys have the art space. Alta Library has a train station. The Lowell Library has a trading post. Up in Walker, they have the Bissell Foundation, so they have a veterinarian's clinic that is children's in East Grand Rapids, right on East Lake and right on Reed's Lake. So they have a sailboat and a boathouse. So each, we were talking about this earlier, because Wes's kids are interested in the play places.
Yeah, all the time.
So each one is different and unique to the area. So we do definitely encourage people to use other branches. So I think some of the growth that you're seeing is different residents of Kent County coming in, because you can use your Kent District Library card at any branch.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a quick question regarding the outdoor activity space. Will that be, will there be curfews if there's get-togethers that go late into the night? I know we have residential properties that are butting up to this, and is there any concern about policing it, in terms of bad actors or any, has that been brought up at all?
We close at 8. So I will answer in terms of like how late we expect programs to happen. We're still planning to shut down at 8. We're working to develop a really good relationship with the new officer, Kate, as well. She's been coming to some of our programs, meeting the different branch librarians, so she also knows what our needs are. Beyond that, between Officer Omar's presentation and what Kate is saying, we don't typically see a lot of random activity at the library. The library is a really intentional place to come to. So people who are coming here, they're coming because of books, they're coming because of programs, or they're coming because of services. We don't see a lot of loitering in our space. We're a little far down the bus line too. So even with bus traffic, we see a couple of people that are using public transportation that are coming into the library, but the majority of people who are coming to visit our space live in Cascade.
And relative to safety and things like that, there's going to be, at least in the plan we're presenting today, there's planned to be LED low voltage lighting to provide kind of accent lighting, but not necessarily something that would be served as flood lighting for the night. I would imagine that it'd probably be, the park or the grounds close at dusk type of thing, but there's going to be accent lighting for safety. One of the concept shows vegetation plantings along the sidewalk, along the road there. And part of that is to help enclose the space so that you feel safe in it, but the plantings aren't going to be to the point where they block visibility. So visibility in and out of the space isn't going to be an issue in terms of blind spots and things like that. The woodlot area that we're putting some paths through, we're basically keeping the mature trees where they don't interfere with the proposed landscaping areas, and the lower level is getting cleared out pretty well, to also increase visibility through the space and to make it feel like a safe space. So that, I can speak to that a little bit. And I in terms of two other things that I've heard brought up just a few moments ago. One is the capacity. If usage is increasing, well, don't we need to focus that on inside? Part of the purpose of the outdoor space is to create more outdoor rooms for people to use and to take pressure off of the indoor space. So that's allowing people to say, well, there's no space inside, I guess we're out of luck. That's to allow, say, hey, there's great places to sit and enjoy outside. So sure, when there's inclement weather and things like that might not be as feasible, but that's designed to take some of the pressure off of the increased use as well. And lastly, Richard, you asked if the pavilion could be pushed off to the next year. And I would say that likely could happen, but it would need to all be planned for at once so that the proper infrastructure could be in place and the design could be sorted out. So it's not like, okay, we're going to do this and later we'll figure the pavilion out. I think it would all need to be figured out together, but it can certainly be phased to where it could be installed at a later.
My intent.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And if you're not having any issues right now with the outdoor space, I don't think you will then either. It's
Right.
gonna be nicer, but
Versus a skate park or something else that attracts, when you think about the intended purpose, really, if people are it's always a concern, right? If loitering or different things at a public space, hard to control.
So if
But
it's
this
not
is a
gonna
type
be
of
a-
design that would be less likely to attract that versus that was before my time, but like skate park, climbing wall, all that other stuff, amphitheater. So
Mhm.
We talked briefly about the benches, and I know that you had some points raised in an email about possible repurposing of some benches.
Right, and I know, based on, looking at the plans and everything, the benches, they're basically like park benches, right? They all look the same, there's a uniformity of and what we had a little bit of discussion about was there's sort of furnishings, outdoor furnishings that are down in what's now the Memorial Park on the corner of Cascade Road and Thornapple River Drive. That the intention for it was good, it's not used.
Mhm.
And so, when this came up, I was like, hey, could they use some of that stuff since it's there, work it into the plan? And then that part can truly be turned into and made to look like and have the aesthetic of a memorial park,
Mhm.
like what its intent is now.
buy an old township hall.
Right. So, understanding that, you've got some continuity of design through here and you've probably got, are looking to spec, I forget the number, 20 benches that all look the same. There may be some areas that those other things would work in, that if it means, you don't have to spend the money on,
Yeah.
new furnishings or, and then there's some sculptural things. And so we were just thought that maybe it could be worked in up here. And this becomes a place where people and kids, which that was part of the intent, that
Mhm.
kids could use that, and they really don't.
Yeah, Lulu shared pictures of just what you're talking about with me today, and I love them. I think it's great. The benches, they're different enough from what we are planning that it would fit really well. And I think there'd be a little bit of retrofit with the design potentially to make them fit, but that's not a problem. And I really like the benches. They came all the way from Spain apparently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and yeah, the other benches, like I was saying, if they were a little bit different from what we're proposing, well, that might be a little bit weird, but to save on budget, we would cluster them in an area where they're all the same, and then that's fine. But this is, I really like them, and yes, we'll find a place for them, and that is one great example of how we can save budget. And those are a bench, but they're sculptural, they're kind of interactive as well, and it's just
Yeah.
perfect for the space. So when
Yeah.
Lou sent that to me, I was like, "Ooh, I didn't know
Yeah.
this is what you meant when you said benches to give us. This is great."
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, really, that's how I felt when I
Same
looked
for
at
the
them.
musical instruments. We were actually starting to look at some companies to go back to ADL to say, hey, we might need some activities or something for kids to do in this space. So when I got to see what it was, I said, oh, that's like $20,000.
Yeah,
In
it's
savings
all
of something I would
very
have to ask for in the
expensive.
future.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what when we were talking about this whole library thing, I was like, wait, there's all that stuff down there and nobody's using it. So
Yeah.
it would be put to better use up here. How big, because I can't tell the scale of these plans, but how big is that pavilion roughly?
The one on the plan is 60 feet in diameter,
Okay,
probably.
so it's good size.
Yeah, it's a good size, and
Yeah.
likely that would probably come in a touch, but that's what was kind of fit on the plan originally.
Yeah.
And so I said, let's plan for that. And then,
Yeah,
good surprises if we need to scale it back or whatnot and
Yeah.
save money or have a more refined design, then we have the room for that.
well, but the other thing, I mean, so the tree lighting ceremony around the holidays kind of gets, I mean, it's been in that park, but the old tree that we had, they took, it was dying, I guess.
Mm.
So, that was a live tree, that's gone. The whole original intent of that space
Mhm.
has changed piecemeal over a period of time. And so it's kind of a conglomeration of things now. So I for one like the idea of a fairly large pavilion because it gives us a lot of opportunity for a lot of different things. Some of the conversation that we've had in a few meetings here is and talking about how we can be more planful about utilizing space over 12 months and having things happen during the winter time and being intent on, planning things that are wintertime activities and whatever that is. We talked about ice skating and all kinds of things. So if that pavilion is large enough to do those things, and we can actually have a tree lighting ceremony up here where lots of people, there's parking, people can actually get here, and this becomes a really nice sort of central community hub then, that we have talked about, but we don't really have.
Steve?
My question was gonna be, to the funding aspect of things. Beyond the, individual donor, beyond the Friends of the Library, the request here of the DDA, what else have you done from a funding perspective? Have we gone to like Cascade
Yes.
Foundation? Have we looked at other individual donors within within Cascade?
Yeah, I have met with Justin Swan along with Jennifer DeVault back in October or November when I first took over this position. He gave us a couple of names that we could reach out to, but they do not have any of the funds or the donor base to supply or support this project. I've also reached out to Claude Robinson. We reached out to him in late fall. And then I recently tried to re-engage with him through his current caregiver, but we just haven't heard back yet. I would love to hear back from him. I think he's been a big part of the library and a huge player in just the Cascade Township in general. But I also know the longer that we wait for this project, we're just seeing the prices continue to increase. So I wanted to make sure we came to the DDA.
So just a final comment on the pavilion and more for internal. I think Ada has a pavilion. Is there any way to find out, maybe with the township office there, how many times it's booked, how often it gets used? And maybe that data could be helpful to us in terms of determining the cost to benefit ratio. I'm not sure if that would help or not, but
Assuming they rent it, they have.
or something along those lines that, hey, it's being booked out for this event, even without charge.
School related functions.
Yes.
I think the last time I went was for a lacrosse celebration.
Sure.
But I don't know whether they
Mhm.
actually formally rented it or whether we all just manifested there.
We can
But it-
easily get that, right, Ben?
Right, I would think so.
That's a great.
But I do see the pavilion as useful for that sort of.
For
thing.
sure.
I mean, I recall having to, go out to Ada Park for Girl Scouts
Mhm.
because we needed something
Yeah,
covered.
we
and
don't
there
have
really
any.
Wasn't anything that fit the bill that I suspect it would be in high demand, so that.
Sounds good.
I think, because I actually had a conversation with somebody like 2 years ago when all of that development was being done out in Ada. And they had built that pavilion, and I noticed that it was not being used very much, but what I found out was they really hadn't done the programming. So it's so dependent on how planful everybody is about.
When COVID happened too.
Right, well,
after.
right, yeah. But I mean, and this might have been even because it was before COVID hit. So when they had already built that, and I was just curious about.
Yeah, then maybe we can,
But if we have programming, then, it's the intention is that it'll get used.
and maybe we can find out the size of it too, so that as board members, maybe we can drive by and go, okay, this is what 60 feet looks like.
Right,
And if that's 100 feet, we can go, oh, just to give it some sort of a perspective of how big it is.
I know it's a very small part of your budget. It's $38,000, but the park benches, have you guys thought about getting them donated, like with someone's plaque on it? Okay.
Yes,
Just wanna make sure.
that's the next thing to talk with the president of the Friends to see if they want to do a campaign. They have at least just shy of like 80 members that are fairly active, and they love to put their names.
Yes,
on
I know.
things.
Everyone likes to see their name on a bench.
And we don't have we didn't have this in the past, but May 1st, we have a new parks director starting who's has a past and very good at private fundraising and
Mhm.
volunteers and scheduling events. That combined with that is the role of the economic development director too. So that's kind of on the township, which I think that void will be filled in the very near future.
well, and maybe even donations.
Right.
100%.
We've got furniture manufacturers here and,
Well,
that.
sure enough.
Whose budget is maintenance in this?
townships and.
Is this township or will this be the DDAs?
Ben?
So I do believe in Wes, you can talk a little bit about the conversations you've had with the Buildings and Grounds Department, though I think it'll eventually be the Buildings and Grounds Department responsibility. Now, there is funds from the library fund that go to help fund the Buildings and Grounds Department. So there's money that comes out of there to pay for that. And my understanding, it's being designed in a way, at least initially, where the maintenance is going to be, I mean, obviously there's going to be maintenance, but it'll be minimal. So in the future, when there's large scale maintenance that needs to be done, it will more than likely come out of the library fund.
Since we're talking about money, let's bring this back around to the reason for the conversation, the request that the DDA provide some or all of the funding for the different phases of the project. And I deliberately try not to do math, so correct me, but if you are asking the DDA to fund all the phases, what's left in phase 1 plus phases 2 through 4, we're talking at roughly 1.4 million. Is that about accurate?
Yes.
Look at that, I did math.
Good job.
About good job.
Let me see here.
So I think that it's time for us now to have a conversation.
No, that's-
It might be-
That's a shade high. I'm not a.
Oh,
I-
yes. I thought
For
the
about 100,000.
overage.
No, more than that, 'cause they only had
They
231,000.
I thought that the delta was $230,000.
For
Yes.
phase 1, for
Isn't it
phase
231 plus 847, which
That's
comes
what I-
out to 1,000,000?
It's-
1,077,655.
That's what I have.
Yes,
Okay.
Sorry, I'm no math, I calculator.
I used a calculator.
I should have had those.
I try not to
No.
help it. So I'm trying to isolate a dollar number for the gap in phase 1. And then the cost of 2 through 4 as you budgeted it, so that we can get our arms around what the total dollar figure of the ask would be for us.
Yes.
so the gap in phase 1 is 230,000
Yes.
and the total cost minus what the library funds would be 1,075,000. Well, I mean, 1,075,000 roughly.
So maybe I'm not understanding it correctly. If someone can walk me through it. 1.07.
Correct.
It's what's being requested of the DDA outside of what's already been procured
Correct.
Okay. for all the phases to completion, not just phase 1.
Correct.
Our balance right now.
And would this be a one-time withdrawal or is this like?
Well, that's part of the conversation.
Got it, understood.
Yeah. So if I'm reading this correctly, we have the cash.
So the estimated fund balance at the end of this year for the DDA is just shy of $2.5 million.
And that takes into account the expenditures that we've already budgeted for all the other items in the budget, correct?
Correct.
That's,
Does
That's good then.
does that include, I can't remember from a previous meeting, does that include the bridge?
no.
Because were we
Yes.
not taking
It does.
care of?
No, I think we. put a
Yes, it
line
includes
item.
$250,000 for the
So
bridge.
bridge is
Yeah,
in here.
we put a line item in.
And it includes
Yeah.
217 for transportation.
It also
So-
includes a big chunk of money for lighting upgrades too.
Right. So, we have the cash. There's always the consideration of taking out a bond for work, and certainly if we were to take on a larger project like that is part of the strategic plan, if we're going to be doing things on Old 28th or things like that, the fact that we're spending money here doesn't necessarily preclude us from taking on that project, but it would be then necessary for us to take out. a bond.
Is our bond paid off or is it gonna be paid off within the next couple of years?
Which are you talking about for?
Do we
Tuffy?
have any,
Outside.
bonds that we're still paying off?
You have outstanding debt for Tuffy Muffler. I believe it's around $600,000.
Okay,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we cannot prepay that, correct?
Correct.
We don't want to, right?
We can't.
So we can't, and we probably don't want to because the interest rate's really cheap, so. You're making more money, so we invest most of the DDA funds in what's called either the Kent County Pool or Michigan Class. And the interest rate they're collecting on it right now is higher than the interest rate we're paying on the debt for Tuffy. So it's a net positive for the DDA.
What about the thing, Ben? I think you mentioned it before about if it's good to have some kind of loan for, I don't know, to protect us against the county, or it's good for so the county doesn't get its laws in our
Yeah, so,
bank.
without getting into the details, if we don't have any debt, it basically triggers an option for some of the taxing jurisdictions to potentially opt out of the DDA. So the recommendation is that we always carry some sort of debt.
But we are currently carrying some debt.
Correct, yeah.
Do you as manager have an opinion about whether it would be preferable to take on additional debt for a project like this as opposed to
Self-funding.
self-fund with the balance that we have?
Yeah, so that's really going to depend on what your plan is for your fund balance. I know you guys are working on a lot of stuff for the strategic plan, but there's nothing to stop you for bonding for that work instead, right? So in general, as a fiduciary, I would argue that if you're holding on to this fund balance and you can pay cash without having some type of financial detriment to the organization, that's always preferable.
And I'm not sure that we need to make a decision tonight about how we're going to pay for it. I mean, we have cash, we could bond. I think the decision that they're looking for us to make tonight is a commitment that we will cover up. to
Will we
X.
or won't
Will we or won't we? Thumbs up, thumbs down. As to covering phases 2 through 4 and the overage for phase 1.
And I would also know that the general process is whatever you make would be a recommendation and it would go to the township board as well.
Exactly. And I would say that, given that if we decide to make that recommendation, that the DDA will need to be involved in some of the decision making and the process as well, even though this is township property. I mean, we in the past have, imposed kind of a caps just to make sure that spending doesn't go above what we had anticipated. So it's appropriate to do that here as well. Other thoughts? I mean, is anyone against funding this project? Or does anyone have reservations that we should discuss?
One final question before that is, are we? So tonight, when you ask that, are you saying, do we have reservations to fund the whole 1.07? Or are we open to funding some of it? Like, is that clear? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm opening the floor to any reservations, whether large or small, because this is the time to kind of talk them through. Rick?
I have some reservations. Partly is because, our next thing on the item is McKenna's plan and, what large scale are we gonna get into there? And, spending $1 million, I like the idea, but is this a good use of our dollars? That's where my reservations come in. And, you mentioned we have a cap, I would encourage, say, okay, we may spend $1 million, $70,000, have the library do some fundraising and anything, any overage is going to be on them.
What about, and this is just thinking outside of the box, what about doing some sort of a match to the fundraising? Maybe initially to encourage, or no, with a cap?
It just makes, they're kind of timing.
I see we're constrained on time. Understood.
I think that's fantastic in the.
It's too late in the.
But for the next,
For us.
but I think it's a great idea just for right now.
Yeah, understood.
Could we approve tonight the overages on phase 1?
That could be an option too.
Can we,
But I think
Carry
they
the-
want to, I'm sorry, but I think they want to have all 4 phases to go to the architect.
Together.
Yes, so we now just need to plan it all out. I think, if I understand what you said, Wes.
Yeah.
it's like
Especially.
Phases, but we need to know that the funding is there for all 4 phases.
Exactly, because if you said tonight, we're gonna approve the funding, then tomorrow we start rolling phase 2, the design into the, and 3 and 4, but most importantly, phase 2, that it completes that whole experience on the northwest side of the library. We start folding that all in together so it can be bid as one thing. Because if we have the funding for phase 1, that's wonderful. That is great, but we can't proceed into phase 2 yet. And so that would be the stopping point for us in terms of design.
So can we answer this question after hearing from McKenna?
Well, McKenna's not here.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're not going, the update from McKenna is in the packet.
Yeah,
And it's
understood.
basically everything's still in progress, so we don't have.
Nothing, we don't have any, understood.
But this doesn't conflict with anything I've seen from.
McKenna.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, certainly not. And I mean, keep in mind that from a transportation perspective, we already have that. We have money in our budget for that. So regardless of what the transportation committee recommends to the DDA, we do have money already accounted for that regardless of where we spend the rest of this balance. I would say that it would be optimistic to think that we would move further on the other parts of the strategic plan in 2023. I mean, that's more of a long game.
Agreed.
I would say I would support moving forward with it minus the pavilion or maybe laying down the infrastructure for the pavilion. But not actually funding it at the moment, maybe.
Let's move on to Michelle and then to Grace.
So a question, did you say that, it's economies of scale, 1 through 4 planning and building, there are cost savings to do that?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially consider phases 1 and 2. Well, I mean, 3 as well. Phase 4 is mostly converting peripheral lawn spaces to natural areas.
Right.
But especially for access, getting to different areas with equipment to come and do future phases. I
Right.
mean, one is just in mobilization costs alone for contractors, you're going to have a lot of redundancy and things like that there. And then if you had phase 1 done first and the other phases were put off into the future at some point, then you're going to have additional potential impacts very likely to those things, even if you planned ahead
Right.
For those future phases.
And my only concern about waiting on the pavilion is that we run into problems where we've got hardscaping done and all of that, and then try and get equipment in to build that thing because it's sizable. I'm concerned about breaking that out and saying, well,
Mhm.
we'll do that later.
Yeah.
And,
Good
and
point.
I also think it's a key element of this overall plan and really activating the space. That's just my opinion.
The whole point.
I would just say for where this one member is coming from, I'm comfortable with going up, with approving $1 million based on the plans. If you guys wanted to approve the 1,078,000, you'd have my vote. If you want, just so as we flush it out.
And I mean, certainly in our recommendation, the pavilion isn't going to be built anytime soon. I mean, we can, as part of our feedback, say that, that too is something that we're hopeful there can be some fundraising to defray the cost,
Mhm.
because you can slap a name on that too, so.
And reduce the cost, as the contractors have already said that they can do it for less money and.
Yeah, because one of the things is, do we need something that big? Because if you look from that end to that end, if those panels are 4 feet, which I suspect they are, that's 50 feet. That is 50 feet, and I'm sitting there, you're going beyond that. What type of programs are we having up there?
It's a football field.
So
Well-
that's something that I could address too, is that whole exploration and right sizing that and getting a lot of input on what that feature looks like, especially, I mean, we welcome the DDA to be funding, if you're willing to fund that type of thing, to be involved with helping to make sure that is the same vision, because you can get those pavilions in a million different styles or orientations. So right sizing that for the space is going to be a part of that whole process when that gets folded into the design.
Because a lot of the cost is just structurally trying to span 60 feet.
Mhm.
A lot of times, if you even reduce it to 50 feet, it is dramatic how much cost will decrease.
Yeah.
So
We don't need to make those decisions.
No, but
Today, but point very well taken, that there's a lot of, additional thought that needs to go into that.
2 points. One, as we talk about phases, and I think before it used to be, okay, phase one, we're gonna do this, we'll get it done, and then when we get the money, then we'll go on to phase two. So we're still calling it phases, but we're looking at the entire project being all done at the same time, pretty much, correct?
Correct.
I just
Should-
wanna be
If
clear
we
on
had the
that.
funding for it, yes,
If we get the
absolutely.
funding for that.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And I part of my brain is also going back to, and I know we've got money coming from the township to help the interior of the facility and so forth. I'm just thinking, whatever we do, make it a wow. When people
Yes.
Walk in, it's like, whoa, this. place
Make
is
somebody think
awesome.
like, well, yeah, that was $1 million. Easy.
But-
I'm surprised they got it for that.
We did get quotes before we started reaching out to Wes that were 15 million for a design that was similar in size, from a lot of local companies. So it's been a pleasure to work with him and to see the work that he's putting in to leverage his partnerships to get accurate quotes.
Let me get back to you with that.
This is perfect. We get them when they're
Yeah,
young and
yeah.
eager, before they're checked out and comfortable.
Well, and I will say too, that part of our specialty is the native landscaping and those types of gardens. And that is a big draw as well. And it's something that it just isn't done routinely. And so you're going to, in terms of wow, I mean, in addition to it, the built features, I always look to the, the softscape, the landscaping to be a wow as well. So that's something that we're really excited about incorporating into the entire space and developing some really nice gardens that help to accent these features and spaces. And I mean, from some of the other projects that we've worked on, Calvin University, especially, I mean, how much people say they go there just for that. So it'll be in a draw in and of itself and just help to complement. the
What a
whole
great
picture.
educational opportunity
Oh,
too.
definitely.
I mean, just to talk about that with both kids and adults,
Mhm.
I think is a great opportunity.
Do we have other questions? For Wes or for Lulu at this point?
Would it be awkward if at some point you put a real live pine tree in there somewhere? Like a large one? Just lighting, and one where they drive by 28th, or they drive down 28th and they're like, holy
Sure.
holiday.
Sure. What you mean,
Holiday.
plant
Get it?
plant a huge one that can
Yeah.
grow over time? Is
Yeah.
Not if it messes up your plan, but if
No.
there's a chance to naturally incorporate a massive braggadocious.
Maybe
holiday.
Close to the pavilion.
Decoration, holiday
Yeah,
decoration.
yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah.
Is I think where we're driving.
I think we can take care of that for you. Yeah, no
Like,
problem.
or other communities would be jealous.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like we have alignment at least on $1 million of the funding through phases 1 through 4. Am I reading the room correctly here?
You're good with $1 million, right? Like you can do something with that?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Then would someone like to make a motion for that recommendation to the board?
Make a motion for approving $1 million for the phases 1 through 4
Funded by the DDA.
funded DDA.
I second.
Further discussion,
Pause for dramatic reflection, comments.
Nope, I'll work with, if it passes, I'll work with Lulu and we'll get something turned around for the board on the 26th.
all right, I think that motion is made with the understanding that the DDA will have a voice in this, the spending of the money.
Yeah, so I was gonna, bring that up too. So instead of everything having to come continuously back to the DDA, I'd like to potentially include a DDA member or two on the project team.
Perfect.
They can kind of go through that, and then at the main inflection points will come back to the full DDA for their input.
Perfect. Yes, we don't need to be involved in the minutia.
Yeah.
On a DDA board level. Any further comments or questions? With that, I'll call the motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right.
Excellent.
Looking forward to this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Don't spend all of that. on-
Yeah, yeah, sounds good.
Christmas tree.
Very long.
No, not at all. No, we'll get that one donated.
There you go.
That someone's name will be.
Someone will put their name.
Anything you can put a name on.
Yeah.
And make
Someone will
the
pay money.
inside of the library just as beautiful and just as a wow factor. as they're
Yes.
gonna- so they
I don't
walk
think
into
he's involved.
I know. I know.
It's like, don't hang that.
We'll just set the
Lulu is-
bar.
Lulu can get that
I
part.
am involved, and once again, every day is an absolute pleasure to serve the residents of Cascade. There is something very unique in the water here that just shows how much this community loves each other and how much they love the library.
I
So.
think someone
you
takes
need to move forward.
PFAS right now.
But I'm with you, Steve,
on
on
that
making
too.
sure that our interior also is gonna reflect that.
Looking forward to
Yeah.
it. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much. Yeah, thank you.
All right, moving right along to Article 6. We do not have McKenna present, and I don't think they're on Zoom. And the reason for that is there really isn't that much to
No
report.
update.
There was a written report in the packet. There's going to be a transportation committee meeting in a couple of weeks. Some of you may have received links to the survey or a couple links to the survey if you both live and have a business in Cascade. So
Filled it out.
as did I, so hopefully we will have some good data to review at our next transportation committee meeting and we can get that ball rolling. And I also don't believe that there's much of a strategic plan implementation committee update as well. I asked Ben to include the minutes of the last meeting in our packet, so if you're curious about that, you can look at that as well.
We have an implementation meeting this Friday, so they're a little out of sync for me to like do it here, but
And we had hoped, and at one point at a future meeting, we're hopeful that we'll get some road commission engagement and
Yes.
also get the engineer to come
Yes.
talk with us
Yes.
about some of the strategic plan initiatives in the Lower Village. But since we don't have that, there's really not a ton more to discuss.
no.
That said, any other questions about McKenna's written report? All right, hearing none. Moving on to Article 7, discuss and consider village landscape bids. So I guess my question to Ben is, has anything changed since to the bids that were presented last month?
Nope,
Did
nothing
anyone
has
have to
changed.
withdraw Given the
Yeah,
delay?
and everybody's indicated that their proposals are still valid.
All right, so let's talk about those landscape bids. I know that everyone had a chance to review them and Michelle and Renee had, they were kind of part of an informal subcommittee in looking through those. Does someone have comments or a recommendation they would like to make about those bids?
I will give my feedback because I didn't, well, I wasn't here for the last meeting. And so I put some thoughts together on the different proposals. And I thought that Mill Creek just outbid themselves at $16,000 to do 11 pots. That just, so they're out automatically in my mind. Daylily, as I was taking a look at their bids, their summer planning ideas. After looking at some of the other bids, it's to have what did the one place called Harder and Warner? They named that as a thriller, a spiller, and a filler. There was no thriller through the Daylilies proposal. There was no like center tall item that I could see. And I looked up some of the flowers just to kind of get an idea what these things were. Triple R Lawn mentioned in their proposal what may be in their flower pots, while the others were very specific. And so I think that could open us up for some disappointment. Harder and Warner, again, I thought they did a nice job identifying that thriller, spiller, filler. And then I took a look at what they suggested from a planting, and they had 143 plants in the fall. No, I'm sorry, in the summer, they had 143 plants, and in the fall, they had 121 plants. But they included weeding as part of their bid. And then Enchanted Garden, they were gonna provide 187 plants in those pots in the summer and 215 in the fall, the most of all proposals. But they did not have maintenance listed in their proposal. And the difference between cost-wise, the difference between Enchanted Gardener, which had more plants but less maintenance, was about $300 difference from Harder and Warner. So depending upon, and I'm a frugal kind of individual. So I personally like the Enchanted Gardener. It seemed like we were going to get more plants. They're going to be fuller. But it's all going to depend on who's going to weed those things.
Which is why I'm more in favor of Harder and Warner, because I know that they would come out and be on top of it, because
Yep.
They're well fueled.
Right, they're
That's what
well,
they
fueled.
do.
They know that, they stand behind their product.
Sure.
so,
Yeah.
right.
I will say though, I see the Enchanted Gardener, it's a smaller business, but their little vehicles are everywhere. And I know Buildings and Grounds is willing to help out in our Parks Committee. So I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying like,
Is Enchanted Garden, are they local? Are they Cascade?
I don't know, but I think,
Yeah.
They're Ada.
and this is kind of like their. I'd pick those two too, but I'd be totally comfortable with the Enchanted Gardener part.
Both great options. Yeah.
So the only thing I'll mention about the difference in the number of plants. It's kind of hard to just measure the, sort of compare the number of plants. Because you don't know what those plants are, so even though it's more, they could be smaller, they could be, so I would. From my mind, I probably would sort of discount that in terms of a comparison.
Okay.
I know the people I know the woman that owns the Enchanted Gardener, I know somebody who works there. And they do a lot of sort of smaller, it is a smaller business. They do a lot of smaller container planting. They do a great job. But I'm kind of in the same boat with Hardner and Warner because they do this all day long for, municipalities, for corporations, for, big entities that they're doing this kind of work. And they're pretty darn dependable.
They're big
And their
though. They're all
prices are-
over, they're on all, not necessarily bad, but it's kind of like they're everywhere.
My only problem with the Enchanted Gardener quote is the lack of
Yeah.
information about
Maintenance.
maintenance, because they're going to have to be weeded.
Right,
And so-
exactly.
I mean, and if Building and Grounds can handle it, then that's great, but I don't want to make that. I'm reluctant to make that.
And weren't they the ones that said, yes, please take this over because.
Yeah, but it was design. It was design and our
Right.
our buildings and
I
grounds director is this guy
understand.
who's like, we
I
try to hire
understand.
summer interns,
I
but
know.
I don't know flowers.
So talking about the library, they were talking about how the buildings and grounds is stretched. And so now we're adding this new thing here. And I don't know if there's plans to add staff to buildings and grounds or.
Especially in the summer, we try to add seasonal staff. We struggle just
Yeah.
like everybody else does.
Yeah,
So we're
right.
bumping up our
If
wage
we- Like my
again.
husband reads though, those pots will be empty. You never know.
I do it too. It's like.
Oh.
Steve, thanks.
I thought you were pointing at me, so.
Steve, thanks for that breakdown. I'm personally, and I don't know any of these businesses or the owners, but I'm kind of biased towards small business.
Yeah.
So I would recommend the small business. And is there a way we can go back to them and say, hey, we'll accept your proposal if maintenance is included? And put the ball in their court. And if not, then we go with the bigger business.
So,
Well, or do we want to find out if it's included, and if not, use Building and Grounds as backup? If we really want to focus on.
And it's just a 1-year contract, right? So if we're not happy with them, we can
Yeah.
switch it. Okay, perfect.
Then what are I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because you're gonna be the person.
Yeah, so I would like to get them an answer soon. So I don't want to wait till the May meeting because they'll be planting, 2 weeks
Right,
later, or a week later. I guess the way we could phrase it right is so. If you guys want to go with them regardless, so I can lead the conversation and say, hey, does this include maintenance? If it does, great, it's over. So if they say, no, it doesn't include maintenance, I can get a quote back from them to figure out how much it costs for maintenance. And then we can decide whether we want to go with their maintenance quote, or if we want to just have our buildings and grounds department maintain it. But, we're not going to be talking, maintenance is probably, $1,000, $1,500 max. So we're not talking about huge dollar amounts here.
That
So-
seems high for 4 pots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems high.
I can go down and weed them myself.
Me too.
I was thinking like $300.
How hard it is.
It's a lot of weeding.
Now, is this including purchasing the pots for future use?
Oh, the existing.
We have to
planters.
have all these pots.
So the only other thing I'm gonna throw in here, about Hardner and Warner is they actually looked at the planters that were on Cascade Road and near Thornapple River Drive separately from the ones that are over by Renee's. And I thought that was clever from a couple of standpoints. One, they're totally visually, you don't see them near each other. Two, they have different orientations, and so they're looking at putting different things in the pots that are over by Renee versus what's on the corner, which is real sunny all the time. So I kind of gave them credit for like, I didn't think about that, and nobody else thought about that. Those are the kinds of things that, you know, I kind of
Like
value.
if it's shady or sunny.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
And again, there's just a $300 difference. Between the two
Right.
Based on their initial.
Other thoughts?
And so we talk about the, the $1,000 aspect, so to speak, of the weeding. Well, Carter and Warner's $300 more,
Right.
and that
It's,
would cover the weeding.
so I think we should, do we want to, in making our decision, favor a small business, or Harder and Warner's a Cascade business? Yes. Are they
Aren't they
located?
on
They're not
the-
located.
the south beach Beltline?
Caledonia, I think.
And they are,
Headquarters.
Yeah.
So they're a family-owned business, though. I mean, they've been in business for a long time.
Sure.
Yes, they're bigger than it, but they're still a small business. They're not a big
they're on
corporate.
an HGTV show that happens to be based, I mean, I'm not, it's
Right.
True, right.
What, Hardner and Warner?
fantastic,
Yeah.
yeah.
They donated heavily to the Grand Rapids, or to the Caledonia Library and did landscaping there.
Ooh, maybe we can get them in.
Well, we might have some
Library.
other projects.
Right. Let's try to,
Oh,
bring it in. Let's bring it in. Would someone like to make a motion? I don't know where we're gonna.
I
end
feel
up
like
with this.
Michelle has had her hands in this the whole time. I feel like that you've been talking to everybody and I mean, I feel like you are our best.
Anything else out of that small group? Feedback.
No, I mean, this was so, and this time around, I mean, we didn't meet to talk or anything. It was just, as I looked through the proposals, after having looked at lots of bids in my lifetime and career, I mean, there were just those things that popped out, that
Look at
were,
the detail.
yeah, that made sort of separated them from everybody else. And their price was in line.
So do you have a motion that you would like to make?
I would like to make a motion that we grant the proposal to Hardner and Warner for the planter containers for the next year, for the contract for the next year.
Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I believe that was unanimous. Did anyone abstain? All right, very good. Then make it so.
It will happen.
We're still in winter, so.
Yeah.
That's great.
You're right. You think they're gonna plant in May, but
Fall spring has come and gone.
Article 8, brief updates.
Yeah, so just a couple things I wanted to talk about. So we did have some conversations about the Tuffy muffler lease. So essentially what had happened is the current owner of the Tuffy business was looking to sell to an outside entity. Mavis Discount Tire is apparently huge in the South. So there is a article in our lease agreement, and it's a little convoluted, but there's basically two different ways the lease can be transferred, right? So the first way is just a straight assignment of the lease to say, okay, this lease is now going to be assigned to this new company. The township board has the ability to prove that at their sole discretion, really with no consideration. So the second way to quote unquote assign the lease is for there to be new owners of the business, right? So if the business now has a new owner, the township board also is the entity that approves the assignment of the lease, but it has to be basically reasonable, right? So you have the ability to review the financials of the new person, but as long as everything is copacetic, typically the board has to approve that. It gives you the opportunity to do the due diligence. So the request that we got was for the first way. And basically what the township board said was that we will consider it, but we basically want you to buy the business and then move out, right? So we started with the conversation that, we'll give you 2 years to kind of get your affairs in order, buy the business, find a new place to go, but we still bought that building with the intention that we didn't want to be a long-term landlord. So our attorney had that conversation with their attorney and they subsequently just pulled their offer off the table. So we're basically back to where we were before. We still think that some type of transfer of ownership of the business is going to happen. We just don't know which method it's going to be and if when they're going to come back to us. So, but for the time being, everything is status quo at Tuffy. We did talk a little bit about the transportation committee. We do anticipate that there'll be a report coming back to the DDA for consideration in May. Really the DDA is going to have to make some type of decision at their June meeting. So basically our intention is to bring back the research to the DDA in May meeting, ability to have that discussion, then maybe two more transportation committee meetings after that, and then a recommendation coming back in June. So that'll start to ramp up. And then we actually had interviews for our economic development director position today. Thank you to Grace and Dr. Siegel for sitting in on that. It was very clear that we had a top candidate, given that this is a public recorded meeting and we haven't gotten their release to check references and all that yet. I'm not going to disclose that right now, but I will say that it's somebody that we were pretty excited about. Is a non-traditional candidate. So your traditional candidates, we would look at somebody that's an economic development director in another community and is coming to our community. So this is a non-traditional candidate, but given the resources that we have and what they would bring to the table, I would anticipate they'd be pretty successful. So my hope is that sometime next week, I'll have an email announcement to the DDA, and if things go well, possibly have that person sitting here instead of me at the next meeting. Though there'll probably be some crossover to make sure that they
But you're always welcome, Chad.
Yes, we have so much fun.
I appreciate that. And those are the updates that I have.
Great. Article 9, any other business?
Anybody new or any new businesses?
New
Anybody that
businesses
left?
opened up since within the districts?
Possibly. I know that there's a new nail salon that went in next to Scott's business. So they've been down there.
Oh,
putting
yeah,
up,
I saw that.
signs and all that sort of stuff.
My daughters are very excited about.
Yeah. The charcuterie board business went in. I don't know if we talked about that the last time, but they dropped off some samples of the township hall. We were pretty impressed with that.
Nice.
I'm just trying to remember anecdotally because I didn't prepare. I
Right, no,
apologize.
that's
So,
okay. All right, as you see in the agenda, we've included minutes from some of the other meetings, so take a look at those and bring questions you may have for our next meeting. With that, we arrive at Article 10, and so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Motion adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Productive meeting, it's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Forward.